talking about the power of social networks. We know that smoking status of your participants can be affected by those around them. That's no mystery, right? But to what extent is pretty crazy when you look at some of the statistics. This is just one study that I pulled, but if your participant's parent smoked, she's twice as likely to be a smoker. If her older sibling smoked, she's 6 times as likely to be a smoker. So it's pretty impactful, and that's just looking at the immediate family, not looking at partners or friends and that sort of thing. On the other hand, we know that the power of social networks can have a positive influence too. So these numbers are from the Framingham study, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, and they looked at social networks and smoking and found that if a woman's partner quit smoking, she was 67% less likely to smoke after that partner quit. Same with a sibling, 25%, a friend, 36%, and a coworker, which is interestingly similar to a friend, 34% less likely to smoke. So we know that if someone significant in your life smokes, you are going to be much more likely to be able to have a successful quit attempt. So by the end of this session, we hope that you'll be able to describe how the social networks in your participants' lives can influence in positive and negative ways. We hope that will be able to better educate your participants about these effects of the social networks on their quit attempts. And we hope that you'll implement some new tools and some new techniques to use with your participants that have really saturated social networks or that have a significant person in their life that is a smoker. So again, we have our panel presenters that are all part of the Striving to Quit studies. Everyone heard of Striving to Quit at least? Okay. If not, there is a handout in your binder. But Striving to Quit is a research study that's designed to support the work that you're doing. So once First Breath is done, these wonderful ladies pick up and work with participants for either 6 months or a year and provide intensive smoking cessation counseling and relapse prevention, as opposed to what you do, brief intervention. Most of you, some of you do intensive counseling as well. So it's kind of a nice handoff to be able to have a woman working with you during pregnancy and passing off to these ladies. So they spend a lot of time with the participants. We have over 1,000 women enrolled and several years of experience. So we're really excited to have these ladies here to share some of their experiences and thoughts. So the first question is for Nicole. And the question is, what would you recommend if a participant's partner or family is making fun of the participant or trying to pressure her to smoke again?
All right. First, I just want to thank all the First Breath providers because, like Chrissy said, you do give our participants a really great foundation, and it kind of gets the ball rolling. They have a lot of ideas in their mind already before we even see them. So just want to say thank you for that. One of the first things I would do when working with a client that has an unsupportive or completely negative support network would be to remind her why she wanted to quit in the first place. Why did she choose to enroll in First Breath? Because that's an option, right? Why did she decide to then again enroll in Striving to Quit, which again is another choice that she's making. So somewhere in the back of her mind, she does have reasons to want to quit. And sometimes I think with life and stress, you might forget those reasons, right? So some of the reasons that a woman might want to quit, they're very common, right? Her health, her baby's health, secondhand smoke. I had a woman who I was working with, and she told me that it was easier for her to put her energy towards quitting smoking than it was to go through all the steps her nurse had told her to go through after she smoked before she held her baby again. Washing her face, washing her hands. She would brush her teeth, and she was also hiding it from her partner that she was a smoker. So she would do a lot of things. So it was really time consuming and an effort to smoke. And when she decided to take that and put it towards quitting, she has been successful so far. Her baby is almost 3 months old. So putting that out there. Other reasons a woman might want to quit is money, which we talked about earlier today. A pack of cigarettes and a small pack of Pampers is almost comparable depending on where you shop and if you have any coupons. So that can be a real motivator to new moms, cigarettes or diapers. Another thing I would encourage her to do is to talk with her family. Maybe not sit down like a big intervention group meeting, but one-on-one conversations with maybe her sister, her mother, people that she's close with that she feels aren't supporting her, and ask them why. What are their reasons? What are their fears? What's their reason behind it? And then also for her to give them very specific ways that they can encourage her. I had Another woman I just saw this week for her first home visit, so her baby was about 2 weeks old. She was a smoker, lives with her parents. Mom is not a smoker. Dad is a smoker. Dad supports her by buying the cigarettes. So money isn't a concern for her because she's daddy's girl, and she gets the cigarettes from her father. And they don't listen to mom because she doesn't smoke, and so her opinion, we don't care, you don't get it, you're not a smoker. So mom was there in the background telling me these things. So I talked with the woman in the striving to quit. Well, how can your dad support you? He goes to work all day. Could he leave you 2 cigarettes for the day instead of 8? Could he leave you 3? Like, what are some ways dad can support you even though he is a smoker? Like I said, because he's not in the home all day to, try to give them to her. And she was like, yeah, we could try that. He usually just leaves me whatever I ask for. I'm like, well, try it and see, So there are ways that smokers can support other smokers in quitting or cutting down. So it's finding support where it's available to you. Like I said, with her, it's her father. It could also be a coworker, like we talked about. A lot of women that I work with are involved in PNCC, so it might be working with that person. It might also be their first breath providers. I don't know how long all of you continue to see women. Some it's 6 weeks, some it's years, up to 3 or 5 years. So it's to find those people that can be supportive in their life. Some other things that we talk about is having pre-planned responses so that when you're confronted with the opportunity to smoke, there's already things in the back of your mind that you can say. So it's constantly feeding yourself positive self-talk. I don't smoke anymore. I'm not a smoker. I can go 4 more hours without having a cigarette. So when someone asks you, do you want a cigarette? Oh no, I don't smoke anymore. So it's right there on the tip of your tongue. If you practice saying those things to yourself, that positive self-talk, it might be easier to then give back to someone else when the question's asked. And I talk with all the women that I work with about positive self-talk because I really believe in it. Like, I'm going to do good in this job interview. I'm going to get this job. Or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve in life. I'm going to lose 5 pounds. It's believing in yourself, right? And I think that goes a long way. Along with the powerful, pre-planned responses, it's having that action plan and goals, which I know we'll talk about a little bit more in depth later. But it's having exactly what can I do instead of having a cigarette? What am I going to do? So it's having those maybe 1, 2, or 3 different ideas. I'm going to give my baby a bath. I'm going to read my baby a book. I'm going to go outside and breathe some fresh air and go for a little walk. And for some women, it's nice to have those written down so they can look at it. And for some women, it's I'm going to play on my phone. Whatever it is, have some ideas pre-planned that they can utilize. Another thing I just wanted to share was a quick client story. And this is like my Jackie, a woman I just loved. And she recently completed Striving to Quit. She did a 1-year study. So you get to know someone quite well when you're going into their home over the course of a year. Her sister, she's 42, smoked since she was 13. Sisters were smokers, and mom was a smoker. So that was her support group. Their parents, or her mom and her sisters, when she was pregnant with this 3rd baby, they told her, don't even try quitting. It's too much stress for you. It's not going to work. It's going to be worse for you and the baby to try to quit, which I hear often. They knew she wouldn't be successful. Mom did quit around her 7th month of pregnancy, which was awesome. And I didn't know her then, so that goes to, someone else gets credit for working with her, not me. I didn't know her until she delivered her baby. When she brought her daughter home, her sister came and brought her a pack of cigarettes and was like, here, I know you're going to need this. You're not pregnant anymore. Good for you. You made it. Like a welcome baby gift. Mom was so mad. She put it in the top drawer and was put it out of mind. She was able to resist that. Then she lives in a duplex. Her downstairs neighbor came, and they were kind of close, smoking buddies, came and knocked on the door. Hey, it's nice out. Let's go have a cigarette. You're not pregnant anymore. My mom was like, no, I don't smoke. I've been quit now for over 2 months. Well, when you're constantly being asked, do you smoke, your willpower just, it's gone. So she started smoking again. And I talked to her on the phone, and she sounded completely defeated. She's like, I bought a pack, Nicole. And I was like, okay, well, let's talk about this. And so we did. And she still had it in her that she wanted to quit, but now wasn't the time. When I talked to her again later, was, at that time she was smoking like 3 to 5 cigarettes a day. So she didn't jump back up to her pack a day habits. She stayed much lower. She decided around when her baby was about 2 months old that she's ready to try to quit again. So she had an 11-year-old daughter that they made like signs, no smoking. Her 11-year-old was all excited. These like glitter pens and like, it's really fancy. And it was kind of neat for the 11-year-old to be involved. So they put them around the house, and they put one on the front, of their door, like no smoking in this house. So mom was able to set those boundaries because it was her apartment. She paid for it. She didn't live with grandma or anyone else that, could make different rules. And then mom did quit again, and she was able to stay. When I saw her when the baby was 6 months old, she was quit. And when I finished working with her when her baby was 1, she was still quit, which was fantastic. And she credits her success to herself, but also that her older children wanted her to quit, her 11-year-old and her 13-year-old. She never realized that before. She just thought they didn't really care. But at some point they had a conversation, and she realized they did care. She didn't want to disappoint them. Her mother and sisters still smoke, but the really cool thing that she told me at our last home visit was that her sister in private asked her about how she quit and if she thought she would ever be able to do it herself. So I feel like mom, she planted that seed of success for her family. So hopefully someone else in the family will try and have a quit attempt.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, our next question is for Teal. What if others in the participant's household are simply not interested in quitting? And what if your participant is not the head of the household?
Okay, so that's a really great question. That's also a really challenging question because in that circumstance, it's really outside of the participant's control. I mean, that sounds really unfortunate, but the thing is, when it comes to choice, we can make choices about ourselves and enforce them because it's my body. But when it comes to other people, you can't say, well, you need to quit smoking and I'm going to enforce it and that's going to happen in this house. Because we have choice. That's a part of our individuality. And so I just really want you to keep that in the back of your mind while we kind of get into this question a little bit. Because again, there's only so much we can do when it comes to other people's choices and actions. Does that make sense? Okay, so knowing that, we know that it is incredibly helpful when your family and when your friends are supporting you. For example, I had a mom who right before her baby, right before she gave birth, she said to her mother-in-law and her father-in-law, who were both extremely heavy smokers, they both smoked about 2.5 packs a day each, and she said to them, so when the baby is born, we are not going to come visit you. The baby cannot come for a sleepover. And we're just really going to limit the contact that we have. And they were like, but we're brand new grandparents. Why would you do that? And she said, you know what? I don't want my baby being exposed to that level of secondhand smoke. That's dangerous. It's not healthy for her. I quit smoking and I don't want her breathing it in. And the grandparents were left with a choice at that point. And you know what they did? They quit smoking cold turkey. And when I asked the mom why, she said it was because they cared more about having a relationship with their grandbaby than they did about smoking cigarettes. And I was like, yay, that's awesome. That's a great story. It's a great situation. We'd love to see that. But the reality is not all grandparents are going to make that choice. Not all life partners are going to make that choice. Maybe they're not at a point where they can. Everybody has different stuff going on in their lives, whether, it's stress or unsupportive environment, or you're just at a point where you don't want to quit because you like it. But when it comes to ourselves and wanting to quit smoking and wanting to cut back, we do have some control. We do have some level of choice. So when I start working with women, very early on, there are 3 things that I really like to try and just keep in mind, both for myself and for them. Number 1 is communication. We know communication is key. As service providers, that's a part of the give and take that we have inside of our relationship with them. And so what I oftentimes will say to women is, if you're very committed to quitting, if you're very committed to cutting back, why don't you talk to your family about it? Why don't you talk to your friends about it? Tell them, I'm trying to quit smoking. Do me a favor, don't smoke around me. Do me a favor, don't offer me a cigarette. Do me a favor, if I ask you for one, don't give it to me. It's a first step. And I'm going to say that first step can be a really hard step to take. It's one of the reasons why we have these conversations with them as service providers to model that behavior so that they can try and implement it on their own. But again, start to talk about it. The more we talk about it, the more normal it becomes. Another thing I really like to think about with them is who's your support network? Who's supporting you? who's helping, but also who's not helping. You know, your fiance might be your primary support person. They're there in the day-to-day, but they are a heavy smoker and they don't want to quit. So when it comes to trying to quit yourself, they might not be the best support person to help you quit smoking. Whereas my little sister, who's not there for the day-to-day, but who is a non-smoker and loves me, is invested in me wanting to quit. And she's going to be somebody who is going to be able to help and be there to support me during that. The third thing that I really like women to start thinking about is, you know, what do you need to be successful? What tools, what resources? I'm not going to get into that because I know that you ladies are going to, but that's just something to think about. So what I'd really like to do is kind of go back to the idea of communication. I would like to share a tool with you that we all use at the Wisconsin Women Health Foundation called the EPE method. Show of hands, who has heard of the EPE method? And it doesn't count if you just heard of it from Jennifer today. She mentioned it. That doesn't count. Like before Jennifer mentioned it, who's heard of the EPE method? Okay, awesome, great. It's okay because I'm going to take a minute to kind of explain what it is and how it works. So EPE. E, elicit permission. I'm waiting for people to stop waiting. Okay. P, provide information. E, elicit response. Do I need to repeat that? Okay. So EPE, that is a framework for empowerment. So really use EPE in those moments where your client is stuck. Great, so you know you want to quit smoking. How are you going to do it? I have no idea. I've never tried to do it before. I don't know what works for me. I don't have ideas. I'm lost. Has anybody ever had that happen? Yeah, absolutely. So this is where the EPE model comes in. So number one, elicit permission. When we start to have that conversation of what steps are you going to take, what are you going to do, I really like to kind of step back and ask permission before I just jump in and I'm like, well, you need to do this. You should do this. Have you thought about doing this? Because if you jump right in like that, it can be really kind of overwhelming for the person. They can be like, oh my goodness, I don't really know. Whereas if you start off by saying, you know, is it okay if I offer you some suggestions? Are you open to that right now? Do you think now would be a good time to have that conversation? And what I have found is when you ask for women's consent, they tend to give it. You know, they tend to feel good about the fact that you're asking them to be involved. After she's been like, I would love some ideas. I feel stuck. What would you do? You know, that's where I like to, you know, step in and provide information. I will say this. When providing information, be concise. Like, I like to always think, like, maximum 3 points. If I'm like, well, you should do this, 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 and this, the mom's going to be like, okay. Whereas if I'm like, well, I have worked with other women who tried cutting back on smoking, and some things that have worked for them have been things like shorting their cigarettes or rationing it out. They set out 3 cigarettes for the day. They maybe don't keep a pack of cigarettes in the house. You know, those are things that I'm not really trying to overwhelm you. You know, when it comes to stress reduction, well, you know, I've heard that deep breathing works really well. Is that something that you've tried to do before? So that's where you can step in and offer a couple good suggestions, but again, not too much all at once. The third step to the EPE is elicit response, okay? So that's the idea that we're going to process what we just talked about, okay? Things like, you know, what works for you? Do you have ideas now that we've started talking about it? And I get a lot of moms who'll be like, actually, you know, I've noticed that when I want a cigarette but I don't have one, if I chew gum, that really helps. And I'll be like, well, that's fantastic because now we know something that works for you. Is that something that we can try and do now to see if it's going to keep working for you? Because realize not everything's going to work for your participant right away. They have to explore. They have to experiment. They got to figure out where they're at and what they need in that moment, which is great. And what I love about the EPE model is that you can use it anytime, anywhere. That sounds ridiculous, but as service providers, we're not just using that with our clients. You can use this in a situation where your best friend calls you up and they're super stressed out and they're overwhelmed and they feel stuck. And you're like, oh, all right, EPE model. Well, can I step in and offer you some suggestions? Have you thought about trying to do this? Well, what are your thoughts? I mean, really, it's realistic. That's something that I think you can try and do. So if you're sitting here being like, I've never done this before, how do I start? the answer is at home, Take a phone call, see how it goes, and learn from that experience. I really, really want to reiterate the fact that, asserting your needs in an unsupportive environment is super challenging. Because you can ask for what you need, and it doesn't mean you're going to get it. It doesn't. You can't control them, okay? So what I really like to do is, if a woman gets to the point where we've done the EP and we've talked about it, and she's sitting here going, I still don't know, my family is not willing to talk about it, they're not willing to work with me, that's the point where I like to be like, well then, what about negotiating? Can we negotiate some ground rules? Because if you and your baby have to live in that home as well, what are some things that you can ask for? For example, can you ask for non-smoking areas? And some moms are able to be like, well, great news, I asked for that, and we decided that the common areas of the house are non-smoking because my baby spends all of her waking time in the living room. Therefore, the living room is not an area we're going to smoke in. That's fantastic. Some family members are going to be like, nope, I'm going to smoke wherever I feel like. And it's like, okay, well, can you not smoke in the baby's room? Is that an area that we can differentiate as being a non-smoking space? Because when it comes to your baby, that's within your control. You have the right to say, I need some boundaries. Because if you're breathing it in, your baby's breathing it in. And I think that when clients realize that and are able to communicate that to their families, it kind of helps them to be able to have that negotiation of what do I need. I have some women who negotiate by saying, I'm going to put up non-smoking signs in my house. And maybe it's only on my bedroom door, but that's my way of saying, this space belongs to me, respect it. And the last thing my last ditch effort, if you've done all this and it still hasn't worked, I'm like, well, let's have a backup plan. Like if nothing else, what do we do in that moment where people are actively smoking in front of you, in front of your child, they're offering it to you, you feel uncomfortable, and you want to remove yourself from that situation? What option do you have? And again, that's where the EPE method can come in to kind of free think some ideas. If nothing else, I always say to my women, you know what? You have the choice to walk away. You have the ability to physically remove yourself in that moment if that's what you need to do.
Thanks, Jill. Okay, switching gears a little bit, we're going to move on to Amanda B. I always have to call you Amanda B. I'm sorry. Amanda B. Amanda B. But how can my participant even think about quitting when almost everyone in her life smokes and they're not interested in quitting?
Another really great question, and one that most of my participants deal with. Most everyone in their lives smokes. So my first suggestion is avoid as much as you can, especially those first couple days. Like Teal said, walk away. Someone smoking, your nicotine receptors are going to be telling you, smoke, 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 smoke. You need that nicotine. So just try to avoid the smoke and walk away, at least for the first couple days. And being honest with your people in your life, I'm making a quit attempt. This is important to me. You can tell them how they can support you. You can support me by not smoking around me, not leaving cigarettes out on the coffee table. That's a trigger. Just seeing a lighter, smelling a cigarette, that's a trigger, and it might be a temptation that's too hard to say no to when you're going through those first couple days of nicotine withdrawal. So and often they're unable to completely avoid other smokers, at work, in the home. So this can be difficult. I often tell them or suggest to them, keeping your hands and mind busy is really good distraction. You're still going to get the cravings and the triggers, but if you have something to do with your hands and your mind, that's helpful. That's really helpful. The self-talk is huge. Telling yourself, I don't smoke anymore, and reminding yourself, this is why I quit. These are the reasons I wanted to quit, and like was already mentioned, writing this down can be good. Putting up Post-its, pictures, whatever you can around the house. So when you're going through that nicotine withdrawal and all your brain is telling you is to smoke, seeing something, I quit for my kids, or I quit because I want to save money. I quit because I want to be healthier. So seeing the reasons why you quit, reminding yourself why you quit is really important. Finding other ways to deal. Stress is a really big trigger for a lot of people with quitting smoking, and it's one of the biggest barriers that my participants talk about, stress. This is the only way I know to deal with stress. So we'll spend a lot of time talking about, there are healthier ways to deal with stress, and these are different for everybody. So I always encourage them to try different ways to deal with your stress, and you're going to find out what works for you, and you're going to find out what doesn't work for you. And then I'll suggest things like, going outside for a walk with your baby, exercising, whether that's getting a membership to the Y or doing an in-home video, whatever it is, praying, meditating, whatever it is going to be that works for you. And I know from being a former smoker, it is nice to have a handful of things you can go to instead of the cigarettes. Sometimes a walk is what does it. Sometimes yoga is what does it. But having like a handful or a bag full of different ways to relieve stress is really important. So I always encourage them to try new things. We have suggestions that we give them, but it's really individual to each participant as to what is going to work to relieve stress. And just letting them know that, when you do quit smoking, it is difficult to be around other people who are smoking, but it will get easier. But those first couple days, first couple weeks are really hard, so try to avoid as much as you can. I always acknowledge the loss of social closeness that they may experience at first. Say, my mom and I, we always smoked together. That's what we did over coffee. Every morning we smoked together. So suggesting changing of routine or location. So maybe now, instead of having coffee at home, maybe they can go buy a coffee at Starbucks, not like one of the $5 things, just like the $1.50, $2 cup of coffee, somewhere where smoking isn't allowed. This can be really helpful for our participants, and encourage her to think about who in her life doesn't smoke. There's usually at least one person who doesn't smoke in her life, or somebody who's had a successful quit attempt. Really encouraging her to lean on that person for support, and maybe ask them how they quit, what was helpful for them. And always letting her know that there is a domino effect to when you quit smoking. Like Nicole had said, you quit, and then someone in your family is going to be like, oh, you can quit smoking. You really did it, and maybe I'm going to try too. So, and always encouraging them to continue to try. Always try. Keep trying. We have some really great handouts that I know some other ladies are going to discuss too. The 4Ds handouts and the 3As, just some ways to deal.
On the flip side of this question, when we have a situation where the participant support person does want to quit, but they're not enrolled in my program, so I can't spend my time helping them. Susie.
So we've all heard about how powerful social networks are on both sides of the coin. If your patient is surrounded by their support people who do smoke, it can make their efforts more difficult. We've also just heard about the domino effect. If one person quits, it might help someone else quit. So we actually have to use that to our advantage. So while you have somebody who's involved in your program, First Breath, Striving to Quit, whatever it is, they are your primary target for sure, and that's who you're spending your time with, that's who you're paid to spend your time with. But we know that it's powerful to involve significant others in any type of health planning that we do, whether it's in a clinic or the hospital. We've all known that for a while. The same is true for smoking. So, and hot off the press is literally March 2015, but a lot of us knew this, is that when a partner has a positive behavior change, that impacts the other partner's behavior change in a positive direction too. And this study, it was in the Journal of American Medical Association, and it discussed healthy weight and smoking cessation and stuff like that. So we know, I mean, this just validated kind of what we knew, but we know that. So we want to use that to our advantage. So a couple ways to do that are, first and foremost, especially if you have somebody who does want to quit, who's part of her social network, involve them in the, I'll use a nurse term, care planning or action planning or whatever you're using. We all know that works. The same can be held true for any type of behavior change, smoking one of them as well. A couple ways to do that are, you know, they can help be a support person to each other. Okay, how is this, my partner going to help me to not smoke? How is he going to help her? Use them in that fashion. And of course, you know, we know that one-on-one counseling for smoking cessation has a much greater impact for people who are trying to quit. So definitely that partner you can refer out for other types of counseling, certainly the quit line. I mean, there's counselors that answer the phone, so he or she can get that one-on-one counseling that your participant's getting from you. That will help their odds as well. Also, a nice tactic is that your participant or your patient probably has a lot of knowledge already going through your program or striving to quit that they could probably share with their partner about what they've already learned. It's kind of like that teach back that we've used in other areas. It works. It empowers the participant as well. Like, oh, you know, this is what I know and this is what I can share with you. And it helps validate what she's already learned. It helps solidify that knowledge. So all those things that we've used in the healthcare settings, of course, apply to this too. The other thing to mention is that most of the time, the partner is probably more likely eligible to have medications to help, whereas, you know, your patient may not. She might be nursing or possibly still pregnant. So that's one advantage that the partner may have, that if you capitalize on that with them, could increase their odds, which then, as we know from studies, will increase her odds, and then you have that whole domino effect that we mentioned. So definitely, I mean, you only have like an hour, sometimes less with those participants, but, you know, involving them in that action planning and doing those tactics can certainly help make outcomes positive all around. And if you want the citation for the journal article I mentioned, you can come and see me after. I have the abstract, so if you want that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so moving on to Shannon. How can a participant ask for support if she is not used to advocating for herself?
Well, I think when someone is not used to advocating for themselves, there's two things that they need to do, which is first, know who to ask and what to ask for. And then the other thing is to practice asking, because she's not going to have a lot of experience doing that. So to help her to know who to ask and what to ask for, the first thing to do would be to sit down with her and write a list of the people in her life who are supportive and who are not so supportive, and how might they be a source of support going forward. For instance, if she's got a brother who's a former smoker who's successfully quit, and she might think about, I might want to call him when I'm feeling tempted to have him talk me out of it. Or if I need ideas on stuff to do, he can be the person I call. Or if she's got an uncle who says negative things about her, about quitting, you can't do it, there's no point, then maybe what you'll want to do with her is to come up with some ground rules that she might talk to her uncle about, like just keeping his comments to himself, or maybe she's just going to need to avoid that person for as long as she needs to until she doesn't feel that it impacts her anymore. And if she can't identify a support network, there's lots of other supports out there. I mean, either identifying a smoking cessation group or even a not a smoking cessation group, just something that helps with stress and camaraderie can be really helpful. Of course, there is the Quit line, which is free for everybody in Wisconsin with or without insurance. So that could be something that she uses and also might encourage her partners or friends to use as well. There's also lots and lots of websites out there that you can enroll in and get support along the way. So many I can't even begin to go into them. And then also to have her think about non-smokers that she knows. A lot of people touched on that. Sometimes they'll know them, but they won't necessarily have much of a connection. So you might want to talk with her. Well, you know, is that somebody that you feel comfortable approaching and letting them know that you're trying to quit? And, usually people are pretty excited to provide that kind of support. So then you're just going to need to then, as she's just identified who's supportive and who's not, then it's just a matter of the strategies that she wants to use. If it's going to just simply to ask for support and understanding from the people in her family, if it's to ask the people to not give her cigarettes or not to leave them out or not smoke around her. Another thing that's really helpful is what to do instead of smoke, say when everybody at work goes out for a smoke break. Like what can you do instead? A lot of women have a really hard time going to their boss and saying, I still need a break. They almost feel like the cigarette is the justification for the break. So just kind of, you know, supporting her and that you need a break too. Everybody needs a break. Maybe you could just go out for a walk or, you know, sit in the break room, play games on your phone or something like that. And then also just practicing with her, just giving her an opportunity to practice saying, you know, I'm no longer a smoker, or what you might say to that uncle who says unsupportive things. And let her be the difficult person because she knows what they're going to say. And then you can play her and give her some ideas of things that she might say. And then, of course, turn it around and give her a chance to practice those as well. So, and then finally, the last, most powerful thing I can think of for encouraging a woman who's not used to advocating herself is to draw the attention away from, this isn't something that you're just doing for you, this is something you're doing for your baby. And since most of the women I work for, the first reason that they give for wanting to quit, they'll say their baby. And they might not even say the health of the baby or secondhand smoke, they just say the baby's the most important thing. So if you can bring that back, that you're not doing this just for you, you're doing this for your baby, is really powerful.
Thanks, great suggestions. All right, our last question, and then we have a few minutes to open it up to the audience. This question is from Miranda. How would you recommend dealing with a participant whose trigger is someone in their main support system, such as an abusive partner, a child with behavior issues, or the parents they live with?
Well, I actually run into this pretty commonly. Clients still live with their parents, they drive me crazy, or my dad has cigarettes, a child with special needs, and it's so hard to get them into their medication, things like that. I guess first, just gauge how comfortable they are talking about it. If you're unsure, just ask, and that can help determine if the participation in the program is even appropriate. And then discuss why she wants to quit, why she wants to come back. For example, if they say, my baby's health. What specifically? My baby has asthma. My baby's already had 2 ear infections. I had a baby die from SIDS, specifically. And then this can also be a time to gain a little bit of their trust, you know, that, wow, you do understand that this can cause this. You do, you know, empower them a little bit, recognize them for having that bit of knowledge already. The next would be to identify triggers. If she knows her triggers specifically, you can skip this stuff, but some women are oblivious to their triggers. So maybe ask them the question differently. What is the biggest thing that makes you say, I need a cigarette? When do you find yourself saying that? Or what is the one thing that needs to change in order for you to quit successfully? That can help them really identify their triggers. Once the triggers are identified, I'm a big fan of the action plan. We'll jot down your triggers, and I had a handout, but with the 3A's, the 4D's, and we list our triggers up on the top, and I'm sure that's something that's available to them, okay? That's one of my favorites. I have it sitting out, and I jot down what she's talking to me about. So then you go into the triggers a little more profoundly. If she says, my boyfriend makes me want a cigarette, specifically, what is it that he does that makes you want to smoke? If she talks about her special needs child, when is it that you get the most stressed out? Is it medication time? Is it bath time? Is it changing time? What time is it that really stresses you out the most? Ask what they've tried already to try and remedy the situation, so you're not going to waste their time and repeat. And then again, praise them for having tried different things. Change can be difficult, you know, especially if it's a spouse or something like that. And then I like the motivational interviewing skills, so, you know, verbalizing your understanding of it. must have taken you a lot of courage to tell me that when your boyfriend is verbally abusive to you, it makes you want a cigarette. Thank you for sharing that with me. To open on your questions, how would you like things to be different? What would you like to change about this situation? If it's a special needs child, I have to give her 6 different medicines, and she spits them out, and so on and so forth. All right, well, do you have a case manager that could work with the doctor? I mean, is there any way it could be 3 medicines instead of 6? Can we compound some of them? You know, brainstorm and make up different ideas. And also so what I hear you saying is, that's my favorite one, because I want to make sure that I'm really getting what they're saying. So you've got your goal and you've got your triggers written down, so that's when you start to implement your tools or your techniques to meet their goals. And it's something that's determined that they can avoid or be modified. So it's my abusive spouse, I have no family, I have no friends, I'm not taking my kids to a shelter, it's just something I need to deal with right now. Or I'm living with my parents, dad smokes, I don't have a job, where am I gonna go? If it's something that just can't be modified, remind them that smoking is one thing that they can change and that they do have control over it. Again, this is your body, your choice, you chose to sign up for the program, this is something that you do have control over. If it's an abusive situation, I like to first remind them that it's not their fault. There's nothing that they are doing. And because sometimes the stress, again, with a special needs child, why? It's my child. I shouldn't get frustrated with them. I shouldn't get stressed out with them. Remind them that stress it's natural. It's a natural stress situation. Other parents feel it too. Reminding them that with domestic violence or intimate partner violence, you might call it, smoking is like another health hazard of abuse. Women are 58% more likely to smoke when they're in abusive situations. Not letting her use that as her reason for it, but just know if she's in an abusive situation, whether it's verbal, sexual, abusive, she's definitely going to be more likely to smoke. So we can't change it. Some of my suggestions are creating a safety plan. So if things get worse, as far as the abuse, as far as if it gets a lot worse, what would you do? Maybe not even actually making a plan, because that might not be good, having an actual plan there. But, brainstorm. All right, well, if I absolutely need to, there's a neighbor 3 doors down that's not, just come up with some kind of a plan. Deep breathing, concentrating on what she does have control over. You don't have control over the way you act or your child's health, but what can you control? And then ways to diffuse the situation. So the 4 Ds or the 3 A's: distraction, avoiding it, different ways that you can diffuse the situation or bring it down. Maybe for a special needs, a parent of a special needs child, it's talking to them about some of the resources that are available in the community so they can actually get a little break. And remind them that it's natural to need a break. You're not Supermom. Nobody's Supermom. Everybody needs a break sometimes. So other times it's thinking about things that can be done in front of the child or while the spouse is there. So meditating, praying, writing, listening to music on earphones, things that can be done right there. You might not be able to get up and go for a walk. You might not be able to leave the apartment, but what's something that you can do right there? Nicotine replacement, possibly an option in the postpartum period if they're not breastfeeding, to help get through the very beginning of those really tough cravings and the withdrawal symptoms. I guess that we shouldn't, in conclusion, we just shouldn't be focusing on what cannot be changed rather than, like the first speaker said, focus on what can be changed rather than just blasting off a bunch of random resources. Sometimes they just need to vent and get it all out. And for us, we have several home visits scheduled in a day, and so I don't have an hour and a half to sit here and listen to you, but I practice my open-ended questions, and I'm asking you these things, so I'm going to be obviously respectful and listen to what you have to say, and sometimes
worse, your participants' quit attempts are affected by those around you. For better, if you can figure out how to capitalize on the positive influences or influencers in their life, it's golden. For worse, you got to plan and problem solve with those specific challenges. And some of the ideas or techniques that the health educators shared, planning ahead for those challenges, getting them written down through an action plan, communicating a quit plan in whatever way that is, even if it's a passive way and you're blaming your nurse. The EPE method that Teal shared with us, the 4 Ds, there again. The 3 A's, which are avoid, alter, and alternatives. That's how dealing with triggers, using the 3 A's. So avoid, I think Amanda was talking a lot about that. Altering, so that would be going to the Starbucks and trying not to blow your whole paycheck.
Or Quick Trip, wherever. A lot of Quick Trips. Well, in Wisconsin, there's a lot.
And coming up with alternatives. So,
gas stations.
and then the power of self-talk, which I think almost everyone touched on. So those are some of the techniques they shared. A couple of the tools and resources. We have the handouts, which I mentioned on the WWH app website. Also, we would recommend the firstbreathmoms.org. It has all of the teaching tools and information we use in a web-based form. Go on their phone, get it set up for them, whatever, so that they can access that as a quick go-to resource. And then the action plan. We use the action plan in every single visit that we do, just to get something in writing, something for them to work towards with a very specific time attached to it. So when I see you in 3 weeks, these are the things that you're going to try and to revisit and revisit. A couple of outside resources that I recommend. I think Shannon was saying there's more quit smoking websites than you could ever count. And we've probably looked at all of them, and some of them are crap, so don't use them. But there are some really good ones. BecomeAnX.org is one of my favorites. It's really, really user-friendly. Specific to pregnant women, there's a module that's specific to pregnant women, and then there's groups that they can belong to. And there's one specifically for people who are trying to quit but have someone else in their life that is smoker and not willing to quit. So that's a really great one. And then I really like women.smokefree.gov. There's a whole section on support too that's really friendly that you could use as a provider or you can share with your participants as well. So those are some takeaways. There's the website, firstbreathmoms.org. And that's all we have for you. Any questions, come and see us. We'll be here all day. So thank you.